It's hard to talk about gardening without talking about composting. And if you've done any research about building a compost bin, you'll find that there are a lot of elaborate setups. There are a lot of really expensive setups or setups that require a lot of DIY skills. Now, you can forego a compost bin altogether and just build a pile on the ground, but there are some challenges that go along with that. It's really easy for that compost pile to become a scattered compost mess. So when I first got into gardening, this was one of the challenges I found. I wanted to start composting, but all of these elaborate setups and all of these really expensive options just didn't sit well with me. I found a very easy compost bin system that doesn't require a lot of DIY skills, that doesn't require a lot of money, and it doesn't take very much time to put together. So I want to share that with you guys today. Let's dive into exactly how I build my compost bins. So first, let's talk about why composting is important. And we start with our kitchen scraps, right? So as you're cooking in your kitchen, as you're using things, you have onion peels or the ends of a zucchini, you don't want to just throw those things in the trash. I mean, you can, but it winds up sitting in a landfill, and it's just not the best practice for the environment. We should be trying to recycle as much as possible. And composting takes those kitchen scraps, the kitchen waste, and turns it into something very nutrient rich for our plants, good for our soil. It's technically a free fertilizer and even a growing medium. If you don't make your own compost, a lot of times you have to buy either bagged products or big truckloads, depending on how big your garden setup is. You have to bring compost into your setup or other amendments to make your soil nutrient rich for your plants to grow in. So we can skip all of that by just composting ourselves. I will tell you though, even after composting for years, I have not figured out how to make enough to supply my garden fully. I do have to bring in bagged compost and other amendments to supply my garden. So there is a trade-off in the fact that you're probably not going to be able to make enough compost to fully support your garden, unless you have a large farm and a lot of animal manure that you have access to. But even still, anything that you can make yourself is going to save you money, a trip to the big box store, and also it's going to, again, recycle that kitchen waste that you have into something beneficial for your garden. So the compost bin setup that I have, it's DIY style, but it's super easy. Anybody can put this together. It took me about 15 minutes to put it together, and I would say the cost is less than $25. It's kind of hard to gauge that exactly because I used 3 T-posts, which are $6 a piece, and then I used a little bit of chicken wire, maybe 10 feet of chicken wire is what I'm using here, and I bought this chicken wire at a 50-foot roll for $23. So I'm just using what I already had. And then I used a few zip ties to secure it all. So the cost was minimal, the amount of effort is minimal, and the time invested to put it together also very minimal. The other thing you're gonna need to put this all together is a pair of wire cutters. And I purchased a really cheap pair. I will tell you though, it's probably better to get a better quality wire cutters than what I have here because it was so frustrating trying to cut every one of those little wires and it getting snagged every single time I did it. So good wire cutters are definitely going to save you a little bit of time here. But even still, like I said, it took me less than 15 minutes to put this entire thing together. So the first thing you want to do when it comes to building your compost bin is choose the right location. To be honest with you, the location you choose should be something that's easily accessible, but also a little bit away from your house. And if we're doing everything right, the smell shouldn't be too bad, but you do have a rotting food in that compost pile, so there can be a little bit of a smell. Another important consideration when it comes to location is find a place that's a little bit shady. This will help keep your compost from drying out in the heat of summer. I chose this shady corner that's behind my shed. Sun does get to it, but there are a lot of shade because there's a dying tree above it. There are a lot of limbs on the ground, so it's already kind of a nutrient-rich spot to put my compost, and the soil that's already there is full of decomposing matter. So for me, this just made the most sense as far as location goes. You should also consider proximity to a water source. Now, I'm in Florida, so I get a lot of rain, especially during the summer. But even still, there are going to be those times that I need to water my compost pile just to keep things active. So consider this when you're building your compost pile so that you're not lugging the water hose across the yard if you can help it. You're also going to want a spot that's pretty level, and if you can find it, a spot that's going to be easy to drive those T-posts into the ground. And the first step in the process of actually building your compost bin is just driving your T-posts into the ground. Now for me, this was pretty easy. I have very sandy soil. I live in Florida, so it's not hard for me to just push those T-posts into the ground. If you had clay soil or compacted soil, you can use a rubber mallet to kind of hammer it into the ground, or you can dig a hole, place the T-post in the hole, and then backfill it so that it's secure. You want to make sure that your T-posts are straight and stable as much as possible. You'll see here that mine lean a little bit. That's okay. But to be honest with you, the straighter you have your T-post and the more upright they are, the easier it's going to be to put that chicken wire around it, and the more stable the entire structure is going to be. I use 3 T-posts here. You could use 4. I've seen people do it with 2, but to be honest with you, 3 is going to be better to keep the structure stable, and 4 is probably going to be optimal. Once you have your T-posts in the ground, now it's just a matter of attaching your chicken wire. And the easiest way to do this is just kind of unravel it around your posts, around your T-post structure. And start with your first T-post and just kind of wrap the chicken wire around that T-post so it stays secure and stable. And then take that chicken wire all the way around the structure until you get to the other side. From here, what I do is I just bring that chicken wire around so it kind of makes a full circle around all 3 of those T-posts. So from the last T-post to the first T-post, there's an overlap. And from here, I'm just going to cut the chicken wire with the wire cutters. You don't have to use this overlap of the chicken wire if you don't want to. You can just leave your compost bin open. I use the overlap just so that I can have the structure close. This for me just made the most sense, but you can leave it completely open if you'd prefer. And once you have the chicken wire cut, the next step is to grab your zip ties and just start securing everything. So I start with that first post, and I'm taking that chicken wire and just wrapping it as tightly around the post as I can. There's going to be a little bit of excess, but that's okay. And I then use 2 heavy-duty zip ties on each post to secure everything. Once I get to the overlap part, so once I've secured the third post and I've got to where the chicken wire comes back around to that first post, I'm not going to zip tie that. The reason why is I want it to be able to open and close so that I have access to my compost throughout the season. The chicken wire likes to wrap back around itself, so I don't need a zip tie here to keep it closed. I just kind of push it back around that first T-post and it's going to stay closed all on its own. This will allow for easy access to your compost pile while keeping it contained. And that's it. The compost bin is completely built. The next step is just to start composting. Now, when you do this, a good ratio would be 50% greens and 50% browns. And if you're not familiar with those terms, greens simply refer to organic matter that's high in nitrogen. This is going to be anything that comes out of your kitchen. It's going to be any type of plant matter that's dying. It's going to be any type of, onion peels, zucchini ends, coffee grounds, any of those types of things. You're probably going to want to avoid meats and dairy. Although you can compost those, they do attract a lot of wild animals and critters and a lot of smells from decaying, rotting meat and dairy products. So I would stay away from those if I were you. But any of your vegetable byproducts, any of your, like I said, coffee grounds, grass clippings, all of that's going to be a good nitrogen source for your compost pile. And when it comes to browns, these are items that are going to be a little bit higher in carbon. And that's going to be things like cardboard. So your Amazon boxes are a really good source of browns. Your leaves are going to be a really good source of brown material for your compost bin. And you don't have to worry about getting the ratios exact. What I tend to do is I will collect my kitchen scraps throughout the week, and then on Saturday morning I bring those kitchen scraps, dump them into the pile, and then I will add a layer of leaves over the top of it, or I will cut up some Amazon boxes if I have them. It's really important to keep your material as small as possible. So if you have Amazon boxes, you're not going to want to throw the entire box on that pile. It's just not going to break down very quickly. What you can do instead is shred up that cardboard or rip up that cardboard into much smaller pieces, and this is going to allow it to break down rather quickly. If you want to make compost really quickly and you have a lot of green and brown material, you could pile your pile up about 3 feet high and 3 feet wide, and then turn it every couple of days. Keep it really moist, kind of like a wrung out sponge. You don't want it sopping wet, but you want it pretty moist. And then you would just turn it every couple days to get air into that pile, and you're gonna be able to make compost really quickly. Now, I don't produce enough green material to have a 3-foot pile at one time. So what I tend to do is a much lazier way of composting, and that is I will add, like I said, I will add my kitchen scraps once a week on Saturday. My leaves on top of that. I have lots of trees that are throwing leaves down all throughout the year. And instead of turning the pile, what I do is I use a fork to poke holes in it, maybe toss the material around a little bit once a week just to get some airflow in there. And this lazy way of composting for me means that I only ever keep one compost pile going. And what happens is, as I'm adding new layers to the top of the compost pile each week, I can come behind that and pull out the finished compost or nearly finished compost from the bottom of the pile. And by doing this, I'm not really turning that pile every couple of days like you would do with a pile that you put together all at one time. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm aerating the top and allowing the bottom to just kind of stay how it is, and it will break down. Now, it does take me a lot longer to get compost this way, but to me, the trade-off of not having to be as active and not having to create multiple compost piles, this just works for me. This is a very simple way of doing it. I'll try to find some links to the items I used here to build my compost bin and leave those in the description box below. I'll also link to some of my other favorite gardening products. Anytime I leave links in the description, I'm only linking to things I actually use and products I actually love. These are, however, affiliate links, so I do earn a small commission if you purchase through them, but they go a long way in supporting the channel and it doesn't cost you anything extra. I thank you guys so much for watching today, and hopefully you're building your very own compost bin. Leave me some comments down below. Let me know what you thought of the video, and let me know if you're composting this year, and if you are, what's your composting setup like? I'm gonna leave a video on your screen until the next one comes out. May your garden be full of grace. May you be abundantly blessed. We'll see you next time. Bye.